Los Angeles, California. Back in the day, the mere mention of California or one of its cities would entice my jealousy because I hated where I lived at the time. Warm weather, job opportunities, things to do, great food, historic places, along with the daily pleasures of palm trees and no snow. People once flocking there by the millions, and now they are fleeing in droves. All because the regressive policies that they themselves voted for, and continue to vote for, not even once stopping to think about whether it was them that put these people in power in favor of so-called progressivism. The problems with the homeless population are continuing to get worse, despite Donald Trump's orders for California to actually deal with the problem. But California's government actually has zero incentive to do so when it is even those homeless people are actually voting for them and keeping them in power. Now, as proof of this, I wanted to show you this clip of a homeless man who was angry at the government for not meeting his needs. He also talks about how he strictly votes Democrat. But unfortunately, that same clip was either deleted or put in a private state swiftly before I could download it. And I noticed that this happened to several videos regarding Fox News and Tucker Carlson talking on the subject. Now, no less than a couple of years ago, walking through the LAX terminal, it would be relatively pleasant. But nowadays, the instant you arrive at LAX Terminal Airport, you're more than likely going to have to deal with this.
Now, here on the news at 6 o'clock, hidden in plain sight, a homeless encampment at LAX. That's one of the first things that travelers see at the airport. The homeless, many of them mentally ill, turning to the terminals, turning these terminals in one of the city's biggest encampments. It is another of LA's streets of shame. And a good evening again. I'm Chuck Henry.
And I'm Carolyn Johnson. The I-Team's Joel Grover has discovered some of the homeless at LAX are suspected in assaults, theft, and other crimes that police say put airport visitors at risk.
LAX police handcuff a homeless woman who was reportedly threatening and harassing passengers. This year alone, airport police have responded to more than 1,000 incidents involving the homeless. But most of the homeless living at LAX quietly blend in, looking more like tourists like Hashim Amani, who says he lives in the Bradley International Terminal because there are clean bathrooms to wash up in and plenty of places to charge his phone. Martell Lewis says sleeping at the airport is much safer than at a shelter.
I'm pretty much comfortable here for right now because it's a cleaner place.
According to this internal report obtained by the I-Team, up to 130 homeless people set up camp each night inside LAX terminals. That's more than twice the number at many of the city's biggest homeless encampments. The report says the majority of the homeless at the airport suffer from mental illness and/or substance abuse and could be a danger to themselves or to others. The I-Team obtained and analyzed a year's worth of LAX police reports, which detail incidents such as transients urinating and defecating in the terminals, stealing luggage off the carousels, exposing themselves, and threatening to kill passengers.
I can't deny that that took place.
LAX police spokesman Rob Pedregon.
This is a problem that comes with mental illness. This is a problem that comes with homelessness.
It's a sad situation.
Danae Beckett has been sleeping at LAX since May. She says she's like a mother to the airport's homeless.
They really take care of one another. They feed one another. They look out for one another.
And we're witnessing the start of a new era.
Mayor Garcetti has said LAX should deliver a world-class experience for travelers. But some travelers say the homeless problem here reflects the crisis they see on the streets of LA.
It upsets me hugely.
Lindy Griffin is visiting LA from Melbourne, Australia.
Everywhere we go, they're under bridges, they're on the freeway.
LAX police now deploy crisis intervention teams that roam the airport 4 days a week, trying to connect the homeless with services and housing. How many homeless people here have you actually put in housing?
We don't actually track the number of people that are put in those beds.
Danae Beckett says many of the airport's homeless aren't going anywhere because LAX is far more preferable than LA's shelters and sidewalk encampments.
These are human beings. These are good, decent people that's being looked down on just because they're in a bad situation.
Some airports in other cities like New York and Honolulu have dealt with their homelessness problems a different way, closing down lobbies and waiting areas late at night to anyone who's not a ticketed passenger. Back to you.
As the saying goes, if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. Now, I used to be homeless, so I know what it's like. But during my time as a homeless person, I learned a lot about how homeless people tend to think and act. Now, the homeless people are generally separated into two different categories. The first being the more unfortunate ones who may have lost their job and spent all of their resources trying to stay afloat to no avail. Then you have the drug addicts, the welfare sponges, and those who just do not want to live the sober lifestyle. Remember this, anyone?
The street life is it's addicting.
Start doing heroin again.
You're living out here by choice.
Oh, 100%.
So are you happy with this lifestyle for now, or would you rather get off the streets?
I'm content with it right now.
I didn't like living sober, doing the right thing, because people don't appreciate it.
It's easier to survive this way than it is, I guess, to actually look for a job and do everything else.
That being said, let me tell you another thing. One reason a lot of homeless people will avoid the homeless shelters is not just because they're dangerous. And don't get me wrong, they can be dangerous sometimes. So I can't fault them from avoiding that. But the reason why they do so is because they know they have to follow rules and regulations there. The vast majority of homeless shelters require you to be clean and sober, and some of them have other requirements as well. Now, we've had homeless people in California admitting time and time again that they do not want to live the sober lifestyle. They want the drugs. They want to be able to do whatever they please. And it's why they do not seek the housing that is available to them. But keep in mind that this is only a symptom of the disease known as progressivism, democratic socialism, whatever you want to call it. Now, this is a quote from Matt Margolis writing at PJ Media, saying, and I quote, "Despite all the wealth in the state and the Democrat control of state government, California actually ranks as the poorest state in the country after the costs of living are factored in." And by the poorest state, he means the poverty rate among the people. A whopping 19% of Californians live below the poverty line, while California represents just 12% of the nation's population. Californians represent a third of all Americans on welfare. The average monthly cost in rent in the state of California is 43% higher than the national average. Nearly a third of Californians spend more than half of their earnings on housing. The situation is made worse by skyrocketing energy costs. Residents who can afford rent or mortgage are on the hook for electricity rates burdened by green initiatives and regulations that grew 500% faster than the national average from 2011 to 2017. End quote. And adding to those miserable statistics, from The Hill, once again I quote, "California renters pay an average of $1,440 per month, much higher than the national average of $1,010 per month. In 2015, more than 40% of Californians spent over 30% of their income on housing. Today, 29% of them spend over half of their earnings on housing. Median home values at $529,000 are more than double the national median average of $239,800. The segment continues saying, quote unquote, "Not in my backyard. Development and construction restrictions mean that California cities are much more expensive for the poor, with Los Angeles having the highest proportion of income going towards rent in the nation. The state and its cities use environmental and zoning laws to restrict housing, which is often disallowing large scales of development of apartments. The result? less access for middle-class residents, end quote. Lately, I've been hearing a lot more people chanting, "Nuke California! Build a wall around California!" Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but no matter what you do, these types of policies are going to continue to spread throughout the U.S. And I say continue, not start, because it's already begun. In Seattle, we already have a socialist government, city council, that seeks to do the same thing in regards to zoning laws, for making it harder for people to actually build places to live and make housing much more scarce. To sum it up in 3 words, it's called supply and demand. And speaking of housing, there's been fewer LA homes that are selling above their listed price as of late. Now, I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that people in LA that just want to get out of there, and they are willing to sell their homes at a loss so they can get away from the craziness known as modern-day Los Angeles. But during last year alone, 53% of Californians say they want to leave the state, according to the survey. And various reasons include high property taxes, traffic, crowds, desire to live alone without roommates, dirty streets, high childcare costs, insufficient public transportation infrastructure, the high cost of goods like groceries and gasoline. All their friends have left, their so-called tech monoculture, permanent water rationing, a homeless crisis, as we've been talking about, with few resolutions or solutions in sight, extreme leftism, car break-ins, nowhere to park your car, shoddy roadways, the desire to save for retirement and the future, wanting to start a family because it's too unaffordable there, better public schools, the zoning laws, as I covered earlier, and ridiculous sales taxes. 62% of Californians say that the best days of California are gone. And unironically, the most frequently Googled question in California was, should I move out? And it's not just people that are fleeing California, it's businesses too. From Fortune 500 companies to even sports teams. Needless to say, this mass exodus is not looking good for the state. From theamericanthinker.com reads, and I quote, "California society represents a modern feudal system of robber barons and the poor. Democrats in the state have set about to deliberately sabotage the economy by placing non-economic concerns over growth. Not surprisingly, the middle class is deserting the state. A gold rush in reverse." How did this happen? In many ways, California has long been an example for the rest of the nation, but the middle-class conservatism that propelled national figures like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan is all but gone. It has been replaced with virtue signaling and policies by the wealthy that hurt struggling families. Both sides of the coin, from the technology executives to families unable to pay rent, vote for Democrats that only make the problem worse. Continuing, it says, "Being a liberal in California is now a matter of survival. Government largesse is necessary to even live reasonably comfortably in the state now. Government goodies have replaced the work ethic and desire to better oneself by one's own devices. As long as the super rich continue to prop up the system, California will muddle through. Eventually, even the tech billionaires will be forced out, and then the apocalypse." End quote. Now, the communists and the socialists in our nation love to say that real socialism / communism / Marxism, whatever, has never been tried, but it's being tried in your own backyard, and it just doesn't work. There is a reason why capitalist countries are having trouble keeping certain people out, while the communist and socialist countries have a problem keeping people in. And before someone tries to bring up the Nordic model saying that it is the real democratic model for socialism and so on, it only works because people are propping it up. When you have people that are not net taxpayers eating into the system, It's like constantly taking an axe trying to chop down the wooden pillar that holds the ceiling above you. California, a state that can't even manage its own debt, let alone take care of its own homeless problem, is facing some serious crisis up ahead. The sad part is that no one is willing to do what must be done in order to bring California back to its original state. So unfortunately, no matter what you do, people are going to suffer because you're going to have to cut off the welfare sponges and those who aren't paying net taxes, putting your system at risk, as well as leaving the voting to those who actually pay the net taxes. This is not a rich versus poor thing. This is not even a Democrat versus Republican thing. It's those who value freedom versus the losers of society, aka the socialists that want to force everything to be fair and equal. I hate to break it to you, but life isn't fair. If life was fair, then we'd all get what we deserve, both good and bad. My point is that things are going to get much worse before they even show a hint of progress in the right direction. And that's not even the saddest thing, because a government is merely a reflection of what people are willing to tolerate. And the saddest thing of all is knowing that the majority of us do not have the intestinal fortitude to do anything about it, because we're too busy fighting each other. We could dismantle this corrupt system in a matter of days if we really wanted to. But the more common mindset is, let's vote for Trump 2020. I want him to fix it. And there's things that even Trump can't do on his own. After all, he needed your permission to be president. Even in a game of chess, the king is nothing without his pawns.